Welcome back, everyone. Today we're going to look at some horror stories from Reddit where people picked up passengers in their cars only to have those passengers vanish into thin air. These are urban legends from our community, and we want to hear your thoughts on them down below. So let's get into it. For our first story, I don't know if this is real or not, but I've heard it so many times that I just have to share it. A guy that I used to work with, we'll call him Dave, was driving home one night about 2 a.m. when he picked up a hitchhiker on the outskirts of town. Apparently they were chatting away about normal things, and all of a sudden the hitchhiker says, "Oh, thanks for the ride. Here, take my bag." And he hands over a duffel bag. Dave opens it out of politeness, and it's full of what appears to be human eyes. Well, Dave freaking loses it and slams on the brakes, and the girl jumps out and disappears into the darkness. That's how he put it. He said that he just stopped because he was in shock. But when he turned around in his seat to see where she went, she wasn't anywhere to be seen. He didn't hear her running off or anything like that. One minute she was there and the next she was gone. He never reported it, obviously, but he still drives with an eye towards the back seat whenever he picks someone up. For our next story, I was about 19 years old and working as a taxi driver in a small coastal town. It was the middle of summer and we were busy. One evening I got a call from a local bar asking me to pick up a young woman who was too drunk to drive home. She lived about 4 miles out of town, so I set off. When I arrived, I could see her waving at me from outside the bar. I pulled up alongside her and wound down my window. She asked me to wait a moment while she went to talk to somebody inside. Fair enough. I sat there for about 2 minutes when suddenly the door opened and an older couple came out. They said that they were her parents and that she had told them to tell me that she was fine to go home now. I asked the mother if she would like me to drive her daughter home or if I should get her a taxi. She replied that I should just get her home because she would be fine, and I agreed. I helped the very drunk girl into my taxi and fastened her seatbelt. Her head lolled against the glass. I drove slowly back into town. For about 20 minutes, I realized that I hadn't heard anything from her for a while. So I turned to check on her, only to find that she had vanished. I searched everywhere, but left no trace of where she might have gone. I jumped out of the car to look around, but there was nothing to be seen. There was no sign of a struggle, and her bag was still sitting on the floor in the front passenger seat. I took the number of the street where I last saw her and called the police. I couldn't understand why I couldn't see her, but also why nobody was concerned. I called the bar where I picked her up to ask if they knew what had happened. They said that they had closed by the time I brought her back and that they did know. I ended up paying for a taxi to take her parents home as well. The police did eventually come and question me, but they seemed more concerned with my lack of CCTV footage than with the missing girl. To this day, I don't know what happened to her or why I couldn't see her. For our next story, I was working for a courier company during the Christmas rush. I delivered to businesses, offices, houses, etc. On the day in question, I had a pickup from a large warehouse where they had several floors of stock in plastic boxes. I collected a box from the ground floor and put it in the van. Then I drove to the customer's address. I knocked on the door, and when I turned to get the box out of the van, there was no box on the bench where I had put it. I checked in the warehouse and they assured me that it was the correct box. I drove back home, which was a 45-minute drive, and parked the van. Then I got out to inspect the area where I put the box. The box was on the bench where I had left it. I could not believe it. The next story comes from a forum. I was driving home from a shopping trip with 2 friends in the back seat. We were singing along to our music, having a great time. Suddenly, my friend in the middle seat turns to me and says, "Did you pick up a hitchhiker?" I was confused and asked, "What do you mean?" He looked genuinely creeped out. "Just feel like we have a third person in the car," he said. At first I thought he was joking, but then he started explaining. He said he felt cold and uncomfortable, but when I asked him where he felt the coldness coming from, he couldn't answer. We decided to stop at the nearest gas station, which was about 5 minutes away. While filling up our gas tank, we checked the back seat and the trunk to make sure we were alone. My other friend even went as far as opening the back window, which had been closed the entire time. When we continued our drive, the atmosphere was extremely awkward and we didn't say a word to each other for the rest of the ride. As we pulled into my driveway, I looked back to see both my friends looking pale with wide eyes. When I finally got them to speak, they both told felt something brushing against them and they had seen a white mist in the corner of their eyes. After that, I started driving more with the windows open. For our next story, I used to do a lot of traveling for work and often found myself driving long stretches of highway alone at night. One particular drive sticks out in my mind. Was driving through the middle of nowhere and I must have gotten drowsy because I was suddenly startled out of my concentration by hearing the crunch of gravel under tires. I looked in my rearview mirror and saw that I was being tailgated by a large black SUV. The problem was that the only way to escape this driver as pursuit was to pull over to the side of the highway and wait for him to pass, which was pretty dangerous. So I pressed on. After a while, the car behind me slowed down and moved into the right lane. In the distance, I saw brake lights. I pulled over and waited. Then a couple of minutes later, the SUV sped past me, kicking up a cloud of dust. Not long after, I saw brake lights again and slowed down. This time it was a red pickup truck. I assumed the driver must have been the one who had passed me and I continued on. About 15 minutes later, I saw brake lights yet again. This time it was another SUV, but it was the same color as the first one. I had already driven more than 3 hours and I needed to stop somewhere. I didn't pay much attention to the time, but when I looked at my phone, I noticed that it was 3:30 in the morning. When I pulled into the rest stop, I looked in my rearview mirror and saw the 2 cars behind me. I checked in all of the mirrors to make sure that I wasn't crazy and that there weren't any other cars behind me. I decided to walk around the back of my rental car to see if anything had hit it. In the parking lot, that's when I noticed that my door was slightly open. I shut the door, went back to the front and started to drive away. When I looked in my rearview mirror, I saw the 3 cars following me. I turned around and looked out the front window. All 3 cars were now directly behind me. At this point, I was really scared. I tried to speed up, but the big SUV in the lead easily matched my speed. I thought about pulling over again, but then I wouldn't be able to escape. Instead, I continued on the highway for about 15 minutes. At this point, I was desperate. I saw a police car ahead and I signaled to him that I needed help. I don't know if he saw me, but I risked a quick glance over my shoulder and I saw that the 3 cars had disappeared. So that was our collection of disappearing hitchhikers. Let us know your thoughts on the stories down below. Did you enjoy them? Would you ever pick up a hitchhiker? And most importantly, are there any similar experiences that you've had? We love reading your stories, so please share them with us. Thanks for watching.